All right, just checking my setup here, making sure we are good to go. And it looks like we are on all the places. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. I'm so excited for our very first episode of the Music EdQuity Chat. My name is Ashley Cuthbertson, and I am your host. I use the pronouns she and her. And I'm a music educator turned founder and CEO of A. Cuthbertson Consulting. We are an educational consulting firm that specifically specializes in supporting music educators to center equitable and culturally responsive pedagogical practices so that all of their young musicians are thriving, but most importantly, so that they can build and maintain high quality music programs that attract, engage, and retain students in their programs. So just a little bit about the Music EdQuity Show, since this is the very first show. I'm so excited. The show is going to be coming to you live every other Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern. I'm going to be on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So if you're in any of those places, please say hi. Hopefully I can see you. And then also make sure that you hit subscribe on my YouTube channel. That way you get reminded whenever this is coming up. And also follow me on all of the social channels. I'm also on Twitter. So the Music EdQuity Chat is a space that I wanted to create because I know that we talk a lot in music ed, a lot more anyway, I should say, not as much as I would still like, but a lot more than we used to about issues of diversity, inclusion, accessibility to music education. But I feel like a lot of those conversations are just very surface level and there's not a whole lot of solutions that are given. So I wanted to create this show, the Music EdQuity Show, to be a place where we can have a space actually to get into deeper conversation and discuss some things, but also to really do some dreaming and some reimagining and thinking about what solutions we might want to put in place so that we can really make some real change in our music education community and move beyond some of these more basic discussions and basic kind of solutions and really talk about what are the changes that we're looking to make in music education so that we really can have music be for all. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about today's show. So today's show, the topic is equity in music education. Oh, one thing I should say. So today's show is going to be solo, so you get me. But actually, typically, these shows every other Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm going to be going live with my special guest, and I have a really fantastic lineup of some really dope music educators. I am so excited for these conversations, and I'm really excited for you to be able to listen in on these conversations. But with it being our very first episode, I thought that I would kick it off solo by myself, and then our next show, we have a great guest. I'll keep that to myself for now, who that's going to be. But let's go ahead and jump in. Today's topic is equity in music education. And so I chose this as our first topic of the first show because, of course, the name of the show is EdQuity, Talks in Music Education. And I thought, well, let's get right to some of the heart of what I hope that the show as a whole will be able to discuss. So like I said, there's a lot of talk already about equity, a lot more, I should say, about equity in music education, which is really exciting because ultimately for me, my goal is for every child to be able to have access to a high quality music education. That's why I do what I do. That's why I founded my consulting company, because I know that if we want our children to really be thriving in our classrooms musically, then first we have to actually make sure that our teachers are thriving, right? So that's why I'm such a big advocate for really high quality professional learning for music educators, first of all, because if we want high quality learning for our kids, our teachers have to have high quality learning first. I'm also really passionate about this topic because I personally know, just like I know you that are listening, the power, and I felt the power of music in my life. And if you'll kind of go with me for a second, I wanted to share a quick story. So I was very privileged growing up to be able to grow up here in the Northern Virginia area where we have some great school districts, some great music programs in those school districts. Often our school districts in this area are recognized as being best communities for music education. And I recognize that is not the truth for everybody across our country, right? I would love for every community to be on that list, but I know that I was fortunate to have grown up here and work here and still live in this area. For me, though, growing up as a kid, music, and I've shared this story, I think some of you have heard this before when I present, music was really a place of refuge. Music and books, actually, I would say, a place of refuge for me as I think about the power it had in my life. But also I think about growing up as a kid, I experienced some instability in my household, but music always was a place that I could go to kind of escape. I think about when I was 8 years old, actually my 8th birthday, my parents gifted me one of those like stand-up electric pianos and lessons. I still very vividly remember my first piano lessons. Hey, Isis, thanks for saying hey. I still very vividly remember those first piano lessons. Then I remember going on in middle school and joining my middle school band. I played the flute. I specialized in the flute. That's what I went to college for. But actually, I did not want to play the flute. I was very angry about that. We were not in a financial position to buy a brand new instrument. My mom played the flute. We had a flute in the home, so I played the flute. I was actually very like disgruntled about that. And so I really discovered that I did love playing the flute. I really wanted to play the saxophone. Later on in high school, I was able to learn how to play it. But regardless of what instrument I played, really for me, the reason I wanted to be a part of music and the programs in my school was because being a part of the band allowed me to have a space to make friends who are a little quirky like me. It allowed me to be able to develop relationships with folks who had common interests with me, but also it gave me a real purpose. I think about, because of the instability that I experienced as a kid growing up, I think about very easily, I could have been a statistic. Right. My mom worked really hard, but she was a single mom for most of the time that I was growing up, and she had a long commute. So I was a latchkey kid. I very easily could have gotten into all kinds of things in the afternoon and evening hours when I was on my own. But what was I doing? I was at home practicing, or I was at the school for a rehearsal. Being a part of music really gave me a purpose. It gave me a place. It gave me something to do to keep me occupied and, out of other things I could have been doing. And it gave me, again, like those relationships. And so when I became a music teacher, I was so excited and so enthusiastic about being able to do that for children, right? To spread that joy, the way I experienced it, right? The music programs, it was so much more than the music, right? My why is really not literally the notes on the page. It's the people, it's the relationships, it's the purpose. Yes, musicians are so quirky. Yes, it's the purpose that I was able to have because I was involved in these music programs. And so when I think about the work that I do and why I'm such a big advocate for great, not just music education, right? Because we don't want any old kind of music education. We want high quality, impactful music education. When I think of that, I think about the barriers and the obstacles that many of our kids across our country in the US are experiencing that keeps them from being able to do that. And so I know a lot of us are beginning to talk more about equity and diversity, and it can be really easy to kind of brush that discussion off because, like I said, music educators become music educators because we believe in music for everybody. At least we say that, I think. We say music for everybody, music for all, right? And we want it to be a place where all students have access and all students can be in there. But I think a lot of times music educators that think that they're already doing it, maybe they're not that there's really an it that you can do as far as equity, but I think that it's easy to brush off being equitable in music education and really critically self-thinking about yourself and your program and the way that you're doing it, because you may already be thinking, of course I'm doing everything I can be doing to make sure my kids have a great experience. But I think when we really look deeper and we think about who are the students that are in our programs, who are the students who are not, right? We have to think about both sides. We can see that in many of our programs, unfortunately, the norm is not that kids have an equitable, accessible way to be able to take part in music. And so I wanted to talk about, I was thinking about like, what are all the different like equity kinds of things that we could be discussing? And so I picked out 3. Again, maybe you remember I said, I want this to be a place where we really talk at a deeper level and we get past the surface. And so I picked 3 things that I think that I see working with music educators now all across the US through my consulting work, but also from my own experience being in the classroom. Like, what are like 3 really big issues that I see in music education that keep an equitable approach from many of our students that we just don't talk about a lot? So hold on, because I'm going to get into it a little bit. The first issue I see is the big 3. And when I say the big 3, I'm referring to band, choir, and orchestra. And I don't say that because I think band is a problem or choir is a problem or orchestra is a problem. The issue I see is that in many of our school districts and our systems, those are the only offerings at the secondary level that we have. And because those are the only offerings that we have at the secondary level, like the elementary level, and as people are, funneling up to those older grades, everything kind of drives towards those big three. I remember my time in the classroom. I taught K through 12. Actually, I taught preschool through adults, right? Preschool, K-12, and then I also have served as an adjunct professor working with graduate music education students who are in fact in-service music teachers. But what I remember being in the classroom, especially when I taught in the elementary schools, I remember a lot of times, I was an elementary drill music and choir teacher for much of my time in the classroom. And I remember often having the conversation with the secondary choir director or that middle school choir director that my elementary kids would go to, and asking questions like, what can I do to make sure that my kids are going to be able to be ready for your program, right? But really, I think the better question that we should have been discussing was not what can I do to make sure my kids are ready for your program. It should have been, what are we doing as kind of a pyramid or like a vertically aligned system? What are we all doing to make sure that we can keep our kids participating in music? So the issue I see here is that oftentimes in elementary schools, music is compulsory, right? Everyone takes a music class, and then they get to middle and high school, and depending upon what district you're in, music may no longer be compulsory, but now be an elective that kids decide to take or not take for whatever reason. And I think kids wind up being in one of three buckets. I think some kids wind up in the bucket of they are so excited to learn to play the saxophone, and they are so excited to be in the band because they get to play the saxophone. And so there's already a place there for them because they've in fact been like waiting and excited for this moment when they get to be in the middle school band. So those are the first kids who already are identifying with an instrument, or maybe they're identifying with choir, band, orchestra, those things. So that's the first bucket of kids. The second bucket of kids are more like me, right? Remember I shared before that I wanted to be involved in music. I started playing piano when I was 8. I did not want to play the flute, but that's what we had at home. I really wanted to play the saxophone. It actually didn't really matter, right, what instrument I played, because I just wanted to be involved in my school's music program. So whether I played the flute or the clarinet or the saxophone or the trumpet, it actually didn't matter. I wanted to be a part of the music program. And so I was looking at what options I had, and I chose them, right? That's the second bucket kids. Kids who just want to be involved in music, and they're going to pick whatever option happens to be there. They maybe not are super passionate about the particular offerings that you have, but because they are passionate about music and want to be connected, they're going to pick from one of the things. And then there's a third bucket. And I think this is the group of kids that we don't talk enough about. The third bucket are kids that we actually never see in our music programs, because these kids, while they love music and they actually are creating music on their own, they don't see any kind of musical offering that is available to them that is what they actually want to do. When I was in the classroom teaching, even my elementary kids, my middle school kids, all of my students, even though I was not necessarily teaching like music production, creating beats, music technology, although sometimes I had units where I taught that. I often remember, especially in these last several years, a lot of my kids were creating music on their own. But when we think about the traditional big three, band, choir, and orchestra, is there a space? Is there a place for kids who are creating their own music? They're in fact producing, right? Is there a place for them in a band, choir, or orchestra? The answer is no, right? So when we talk about how can we structurally make some changes towards equity in music education, I think one of the like glaring big issues that I think we don't talk enough about is that we don't have enough offerings at our secondary level, or even like leading up to it from elementary school. We don't have enough offerings that speak to kids. So what happens is, if you're not in that first bucket that's just excited to play a particular instrument, or the second bucket like me that's going to play whatever as long as I can be in a music program, we forget about that third bucket of kids that actually, if we could have an offering for them that they would be, that identifies, that they can identify with, I should say. If we had an offering for them, they would be able to stay with us in our music programs. And I think we don't talk enough about it because, traditionally, the big three, that's where it's at, right? Although I'm beginning to see, maybe you are too, more often where we do have schools and districts that are addressing this issue. Before the holidays, I think it was December, I remember being on a NAFME webinar where they were sharing. It was a teacher in Texas and then a professor in Texas. And I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the name of the district in the school. DM me and I'll send it to you. I'll find it. But it was a teacher in Texas and a professor in Texas, and they had done a study. The professor did a study on this teacher's mariachi program. And I don't think it was just the teacher. It was like a program throughout like the middle and the high schools, right? It was like a multi-school. It was like in the district. And because in that area, mariachi is something that speaks to a lot of the kids and the community members, right? So they made a space for another way to contribute and to plug into music. And I am beginning to see more often, especially at high school, not so much at like the maybe elementary or middle school level, but I am seeing more in high school. Well, no, there's a middle school I am thinking of where I'm seeing more like music technology, music production kinds of things. I would even push us even further. Are there ways that we can offer like music composition to kids in middle and high school, right? Once they leave the compulsory kind of elementary way of teaching, but even in elementary school, right? Oftentimes elementary teachers are teaching composition, but then they go on to middle and high school, they go on to band, and they never compose or create music again, right? And so how are we addressing that third bucket of kids that we lose when we don't have music offerings that speak to them, right? When we are only so focused on the big three, band, choir, and orchestra, we are literally leaving out a lot of kids who would eagerly participate in music with us, but we don't have an offering for them because we're kind of stuck in tradition. And that actually leads me to the second problem I wanted to talk about, which is tradition itself. I think going back again to what I said, that music educators, we become music teachers because we have these memories that are so strong that we identify with. That is what led us to be music educators, to help other kids have those kinds of strong memories and feelings and emotions. And some of those are just literally tied up in traditions, right? I'm sure you can think of a time when you were in your middle or high school program, or even college, or I can think of many times even in college where there were like traditional things that we did. And some of those are my best memories, right? Like the traditions, that marching band, I was a marching band kid, a drum major. Some of those traditional things that we did are like some of my best memories. But then on the flip side of that, some of the traditional things that I see many music educators like white knuckle holding on to are actually keeping some of our students from being able to either engage at all with us, right? We lose some kids automatically. And then there's kids who are in our programs, but they're not able to really fully show up because some of these traditional things are in the way. So let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. So when I say tradition, oftentimes, because that's the way that we were taught as music educators, we set up our programs in a very traditional way. Let's use band as an example. So we have auditions for the band, for like the higher band, and that's a whole other can of worms in itself. We have a band, maybe it's not audition, kids can just come in. We have a very traditional way of, the director chose the pieces that the band is going to perform. And they decided those probably in the summer during their planning. And now they're going in, we're starting rehearsals. They have warm-ups that they've already chosen. They're on the podium, they're teaching the kids. Hopefully the kids are just following along and doing what the director has done. A very traditional way of teaching. And I would say that that's pretty similar in choir and also in orchestra, right? A very traditional teacher on the director on the stage or on the podium. Kids are there receiving all the things. The problem with that, and we know that the best learning happens when you are the one doing the learning, right? And you're the one doing the messiness of figuring out stuff. And so when the director is the one making all the decisions about repertoire, about how the rehearsal is going to be structured, about what parts and passages of the rep is going to be practiced when the director is making all of those decisions, not only is there not any space for student voice or choice, right? But there also isn't any space for kids to start to work in partnership with the director. And we know more and more, especially as our classrooms are getting more linguistically, culturally, and ability diverse, that traditional way, it actually never really worked for all of us in the first place, but it's becoming more apparent how ineffective that is as our classrooms has become a more diverse place and has lots of different kids. And we want that, right? We want our music classrooms and music programs to be highly diverse. We want really our music classrooms, our ensembles to reflect the student community, right? And I often say, if you are looking at your student community of your school, and you look at the community of the kids in your program, and you're seeing some things that don't match up, that's a problem, right? Like there should be some direct correlations to the community and who's in your program, I should say. And so when we think about the kids who get left out because the way that we're teaching this traditional way that we've been taught, and so now we're teaching it that way, we leave a lot of our kids out. That is inaccessibility. That is itself, inequity in action. And so I challenge us as music educators to think about, if our goal is to be able to attract, engage, and retain kids in our music programs, so that our programs are flourishing, right? I know a lot of directors recently have shared with me that the pandemic decimated a lot of our secondary music programs. So a lot of what is happening now is, how can we rebuild? If we would be able to rebuild in a way that is sustainable, right? We're able to not just rebuild, but maintain and be able to attract kids, keep them with us, and retain them, then we have to think about another way to teach, and we have to let go of these traditional things. And I think some of that also is like a pressure. Like I know for some of my secondary ensemble friends, having to prepare for adjudication and festivals and things like that, there's a pressure to do it the traditional way. But I would challenge all of us to think about, does the traditional way serve all of the kids who are both in my program right now and the kids who are not, but they could be? Does that traditional way of selecting repertoire serve all those kids? Or would a better way to serve the kids who are in my program now and could be, would a better way to choose repertoire be to do it in partnership with them? And I don't mean let's play hip hop and pop music all the time, because I think also it's important as music teachers and as the professionals in the room that we're helping our kids to expand their minds and see other kinds of music. I'm not talking about just play hip hop and pop, although do that sometimes. But can we still work in partnership with our kids to help them to gain these skills and discernment to be able to choose and select repertoire for themselves, right? We want kids to go out and still engage in music. They don't have the skill to pick, right? But we can help them develop that within the time that they're in our programs. And think about the kids who are not in our program but could be, being able to see that the music program isn't just the director stands there and tells everybody what to do, as a way for kids to see that, oh, there maybe is a place for me in this program after all. So I know that is letting go of the tradition, right, can be really difficult for us as music educators, because we have these like heart memories that are attached. But again, if we want our music programs to be places that truly are for everybody, right, music for all, we have to think about the kids who are with us right now and the kids who are not but could be, right? And I think tradition stands in our way a lot of the time. And then the third problem I wanted to talk about a little bit tonight is teaching only from our vantage point. I think actually sometimes the inequity that some music programs are experiencing, and this might be hard to hear, I think it's hard to say, because I know I myself have been the problem. I was the obstacle. I was the barrier for some students, because I was only teaching from my vantage point. And I think sometimes the literal inequity happening in some of our programs is the person leading the program. Not because that person leading the program doesn't have the best in heart for the students that they are serving, but because they are only serving from what they can see, what they have experienced, from their own understanding, from their own frame of reference. When you're only operating from your own frame of reference and your own vantage point, you're not making any room or any space for other ways of being, other ways of thinking. You're not making ways for other people. And I think when we are considering how can we make sure that more kids have access to our programs, high quality programs, sometimes we have to think about how we might be the obstacle and the barrier, right? Because sometimes the difference between two high schools in the same school district, or two elementary schools or two middle schools, the difference between the two schools and the quality of education that the kids are getting musically is literally the person leading the program, right? And so that also plays into the undue burden that is placed on music educators in general, but also music educators, to be meeting the needs of so many diverse kids without the kind of support that we need to really receive, so that we can do that fully and be able to still live a high quality life, enjoy going to our work and enjoy doing what we're doing. But when we think about sometimes when there's a difference, right? Same districts, same curriculum, same access to resources, hopefully, but then like the difference in the quality is so different. Well, then we have to really look at, well, who's leading those programs? Is maybe the obstacle and barrier the person who's leading it? And it might be because they are still figuring some things out, which we all are, right? But it also might literally be because they are a little bit stuck in their ways, right? That goes back to what I was thinking about tradition. They're a bit stuck in their ways and they want to do it their way from their understanding, their frame of reference. But the kids that they are serving, that's not gelling with them, right? And so as a result, those programs have a harder time attracting kids because kids aren't engaged. And, the kids in our programs are the best advertisers and promoters, right? When kids see their peers having a great time in your music program, but they're not, they want to join, they want to be a part of it as well. But when they don't see kids in your program having a great time, they don't see lots of kids, doing great things, then it gets harder to attract kids, right? So when you're not, the retention issue also is an attraction issue at the same time. So I would challenge you to think about what might be some ways that the people that are leading the program, whether it's you by yourself or if you have other folks with you, if you have a team, are there parts of how you are leading the programs that then, like within themselves, might be the barriers or the obstacles? It might be the traditions that you're holding so hard onto that's leaving that third bucket of kids I was saying before out. It might be in the way that you're structuring the programs, right? If there's only band, choir, and orchestra, that might also be a little bit of an issue. It might be some of the beliefs that you hold, right? If kids know that you have certain beliefs and those beliefs are in direct opposition with some of their beliefs, their cultures, their values, that also is going to be an obstacle and a barrier. So I would challenge us to continue to think about how, as music educators, we really can we're operating not just from our own vantage point, but from a place of understanding and acceptance of ways of being that might be different from us. And how can we make space for students in our program now, but maybe not in our program yet, right? To be able to find a place within our program without us and our beliefs and our ways of doing things being the barrier where they can't access the things that we are doing. So I would love to hear more about what you all think about that. So feel free to share that in a comment or send me a DM, because I think those three things, right? The big three, band, choir, orchestra, being the only offerings, tradition, and only teaching from our own vantage point. I think those are problems in inequity of music education that we just don't talk enough about. We talk a lot about, how do we support multilingual students? How do we support students who are from backgrounds where they don't have necessarily like the financial resources? And those things I think are talked about a lot, but I don't know that we're talking about some of the other things. And I think some of it just goes down to, we have a lot of surface level discussions, but I told you before, I want to have a little bit deeper discussions here on this Music Equity Show. And so I invite you to share with me and let me know, what are your thoughts? What are other areas that you feel like we don't talk enough about as far as equity in music education? And as we reimagine and dream what things could be like, I would love to hear your thoughts about what might be some things that we can add to that list as well. So let's wrap up for today. Thank you for joining me for our first episode of the Music Equity Chat. Again, I'm your host, Ashley Cuthbertson, CEO and founder of Cuthbertson Consulting, an educational consulting firm that supports music educators in centering equitable and culturally responsive practices. So we're going to be talking a lot about equity and cultural responsiveness here on this show. Today was just the beginning. And again, I am so excited to have this space to be able to talk about these issues at a deeper level. But more importantly, to really be able to dream together and reimagine what is possible for us in music education as we all continue to strive for ensuring that music really is for everyone. So if you have not yet, please make sure that you hit the subscribe button on my YouTube channel and follow me on your favorite social media platform. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Twitter, I'm on LinkedIn. So make sure you're following me. And also, really the best way to stay up to date with what we're doing here with my educational consulting firm and other things I have going on, the best way is actually just to be on my email list. So I send a weekly newsletter, my weekly notes every week to my folks. And I also send out whenever I have new blog posts, when I have new episodes, I'll also be sending that out. So if you're not already on my email list, I encourage you to head to my website, ashleycuthbertson.com, and make sure that you sign up so that you can get in on this great information in this great community. So I will see you next time on the Music EdQuity Chat Show. And again, let me know if you have any thoughts or comments about what we discussed today.